In this lesson, we will learn how to calculate average speeds when a trip consists of two or more parts during which the speeds differ. In the example shown here, Jasmine drives 40 miles per hour for part of the trip, and she drives 60 miles per hour for another part. Our goal is to find her average speed for the entire trip. Now, a common mistake here is to find the average speed by adding the two speeds and dividing by 2 to get an average speed of 50 miles per hour. This conclusion is incorrect, and we can see why it is incorrect by examining the following example. Let's say we are making a 1,000-mile trip from point A to point B, and we are driving at a speed of 1 mile per hour. Now, as you can imagine, the trip takes a very long time, but after weeks of driving, we are only 1 mile away from our destination. At that point, we increase our speed and drive 999 miles per hour for the last mile. Now that the trip is over, what was our average speed? Well, if we take the sum of the two speeds and divide by 2, we get an average speed of 500 miles per hour. But that cannot be the average speed. Had the average speed been 500 miles per hour, the entire 1,000-mile trip would have taken only 2 hours, not several weeks. So clearly, this is not how we find the average speed. Now, to find the speed during any trip, we simply divide the distance traveled by the travel time. Since this particular trip has two distinct parts to it, it might be useful to rewrite the formula to say that the average speed during a trip is equal to the total distance traveled divided by the total travel time. So let's begin by finding the total distance traveled. Now, although the question does not explicitly tell us the total distance traveled, we do have enough information to calculate it. Just be sure to note that there are two distances that we need to calculate here: the distance traveled at 40 miles per hour and the distance traveled at 60 miles per hour. To calculate both distances, we will apply the distance formula. Now, the question tells us that Jasmine drives for 2 hours at 40 miles per hour, so the distance is equal to 40 times 2, which is 80. So Jasmine traveled 80 miles at a speed of 40 miles per hour. Jasmine also drives for 3 hours at 60 miles per hour, so the distance traveled during this part of the trip equals 60 times 3, which is 180 miles. At this point, we can add this information to the formula to find the average speed. The total distance traveled equals 80 miles plus 180 miles. Alright, now let's find the total travel time. The question tells us that Jasmine drives for 2 hours at 40 miles per hour, and then she drives for 3 hours at 60 miles per hour. So the total travel time must be 2 hours plus 3 hours. When we simplify this, we get 52. And since the distance is measured in miles, and the time is measured in hours, the average speed is measured in miles per hour. So the average speed for the entire trip is 52 miles per hour. Okay, now let's try another example. Here, Yoshi travels from Townville to Villageton at a speed of 20 miles per hour, and then he returns to Townville at a speed of 80 miles per hour. Our goal is to find Yoshi's average speed for the entire trip, so once again we will apply the average speed formula. To begin, let's find the total distance traveled. Now, the question does not tell us the distance between the two towns, and we are not given any information about travel times. So it seems that there is no way to determine the required distance here. Given this, let's let D represent the distance between the two towns. This means the total distance traveled will equal D, the distance from Townville to Villageton, plus another D to represent the distance traveled on the return trip. Next, we need to find the total time traveled. Now, please recognize that there are two times to calculate here: the time spent traveling at 20 miles per hour and the time spent traveling at 80 miles per hour. Now, since the question does not provide any times, we must calculate these times using the time formula. The time spent traveling at 20 miles per hour will equal D, the distance between the towns, divided by the speed of 20 miles per hour. Similarly, the time spent driving at 80 miles per hour will equal the distance d divided by the speed of 80 miles per hour. Now that we have calculated the two separate travel times, the total travel time will equal d over 20, the time spent driving at 20 miles per hour, plus d over 80, the time spent driving at 80 miles per hour. At this point, we need to simplify. First, we can simplify the numerator to be 2d, and next we will rewrite the fractions on the bottom with the same denominators. Now that the denominators are equal, we can combine the fractions to get 5d over 80. Next, to divide by 5d over 80, we will multiply it by the reciprocal, 80 over 5d. At this point, the d's conveniently cancel out to get 160 over 5, which equals an average speed of 32 miles per hour. Notice that although we did not know the distance between the two towns, we were still able to find the average speed of the trip. Okay, let's summarize. In this lesson, we applied the average speed formula, and we learned that it is sometimes necessary to assign variables to solve average speed questions.